Hi, parents. Lucky Mommy here, single mom of three teenagers, and welcome to my chaos. When I was a kid, I had a lot of fear, and I didn't necessarily have language for that fear. So it really expressed itself in the easiest emotion, which is anger. I had a lot of rage. I'd have these fits. And at some point, I remember my dad taking me outside and telling me to run around the block, and I was so angry, right? And it was really hard for me to even run. And but I did it, right? I ran around the block, and when I got back home, I was like, fine, I ran around the block, and he's like, do it again. And so I did it again, and he made me do it again, and he made me run until I had calmed down. And then I was able to actually have a conversation with him about what it was that I was angry about. Now, I hated this lesson. It was super frustrating for me. But when I had kid two and he started to deal with anger and rage issues, I remembered my dad's lesson and I remembered that it worked. And so I tried it with him. He was, having a rage fit at one point and needed to calm down and couldn't manage his anger. And so I took him to the backyard and I said, I want you to run around the whole backyard. And I need you to stay near the fence and run around the edge the entire way. Well, he was so angry that he couldn't control his feet and he fell. And I made him get up and keep moving. And he fell a few times before he could get control of his body and actually be able to move. So he ran that lap, and then I made him run another lap, and then I made him run another lap. And I had him to run until I felt like he was calm enough to function. So when he calmed down and he was able to talk again, I told him that he could stop running. And so he immediately tried to walk past me and leave the yard. And I was like, where are you going? And he said, I need to be somewhere where I can look at the stars and I don't have to look at you. I said, okay. So he's got his words back. He's always had fiery language. And so I figure at this point, he's calm, he's good, he can move on with his life. And so I told him, lay down on the picnic table. You can look up at the stars from the backyard. I'm going to go inside and you don't have to look at me. Over the years, I've had to remind kid two that running helps to manage the emotion that's overwhelming. And now as a teenager, when he starts feeling really frustrated, a lot of times it's with me, sometimes it's with other people. When he starts to feel really frustrated, he says, Mom, I need to take a run. And I say, great, go take a run. And so he goes outside and he runs down to the river and hangs out at the park for a little bit. And he comes back feeling calmer and better able to communicate the frustration or whatever it is that he's experiencing so that we can kind of move through it. So I found this process to be really effective. And you might want to be creative and think about other things that you can do to push through the adrenaline. Running laps. I have kid three to do jumping jacks. Running up and down the stairs, various different things like that. But the idea is that driving through the adrenaline with some kind of physical activity can help you to regulate the emotions and get to a point where you can actually communicate. So your action item for this week is to think about what are some of the ways that you can physically manage an overabundance of emotion in your kid. And it's important for you to kind of think about this in advance and really be prepared with the language that you're going to use and the plan for how you will manage through this physical activity. Because it's really hard to be thoughtful in the heat of the moment, right? When your child is flaring up and things are really intense, it's hard to be creative and it's hard to be thoughtful about your approach. So thinking about it now, when you're not in the moment, I think will help you to get to a place where when the time comes, you know how to handle it and you know what you want to say. When kid one was in his, terrible twos probably, he used to have meltdowns. And he'd just be in the middle of the floor and he'd flip out and he'd yell and scream and have these whole fits. And so I would look around and signal to whatever adults in the room that it was time for us to leave. And we would get up and leave the room and let him have his meltdown without an audience. And whatever he needed to do to get it out of his system, we'd let him do that. And then when he was ready, he would come and join us wherever we were in the house. And this was his reset moment, but it was important for him to have his reset moment again without an audience. So when we had kid 2 and he would have his meltdowns, it was actually harder to do it that same process because kid 1 wasn't going to walk out of the room and leave his brother when he was crying. So with kid 2, I would send him to another room. I would say, I need you to go and have some time to yourself, and you can come back when you're, ready to be civilized, is the language that I would use. And I didn't set time for the timeout, right? Like it wasn't like, go sit by yourself for 10 minutes or something like that. Because I think when you need to take time to yourself to reset, it's not on a particular schedule, right? Maybe you just need quiet. Maybe you want to listen to some music. Maybe you want to go and read a book. Whatever it is, you need the time that makes sense for you to be able to reset and to be able to rejoin the rest of the group. And maybe you don't want to rejoin the rest of the group at all. Maybe you just want to be by yourself. And it turned out that, kid 2 is a pretty extreme introvert. So what he needed was that extended time to himself, and that worked really well. Now, once the emotions have been reset, you got to do a debrief. And you need this opportunity to really sit down and kind of talk about the triggers and figure out what happened. And with younger kids, it's not difficult, right? You just want to understand why were things so frustrating for them and what could be done differently to avoid that type of meltdown in the future. And they're generally pretty good about being able to tell you what upset them, but they can't talk about it, of course, while they're upset. And so once you have this language, then you'll be better able to understand how to avoid these meltdowns in the future, but they will also be able to develop language to express what they need from you. Now, I haven't always been great at this part, right? I think I'm really good in a crisis. I'm good at handling when things get out of control, right? That's kind of my, strong space. But I wasn't always great with the debrief. When I did take the time to have those conversations, I think it helped me to be a better parent. I learned a lot about who they were and what they needed to be able to create a society within our home that would work for them. Now that they're older, teenagers are great at telling you like what are the things that they need from you and how you're failing as a parent. So whether it's, mom, you work all the time, you're always doing something, and you expect us to be doing something all the time too. I wish you knew how to relax so that we could have time to relax. Or, mom, you always have a list, and it's hard for us to know what's important and what we should focus on at any given point because you're constantly throwing things at us from your list. Or, mom, you always try to solve our problems, and sometimes we just want somebody to listen. Or finally, it was my turn to cook, and I wanted to do it, and you always jump in and help, and you take over, and you don't let me do things on my own. So these are really good, important points of feedback. And it's language that I think the kids have developed over the years as they've gotten practice talking about why something was so upsetting and helping to figure out how we can not have those same types of interactions in the future. While you are thinking about language and thinking about the techniques that you will use to de-escalate emotional situations in your house, I want you to think about age appropriateness and child appropriateness of your communications and your de-escalation methods. What I did with the kids when they were very small is different from how I would approach de-escalation now that they are teenagers. And what I do for kid 2 is very different from what I would do for kid 3. So I want you to differentiate between both ages and between your different children in terms of how they interact with the world and who they are, and the best methods for getting what you want to get out of them and helping them to deal with the different situations. Try it out. Let me know how it goes. Again, I always want to hear your stories. Click the subscribe button and give this video a quick thumbs up. Follow me on Instagram at Lucky Mommy. Let me hear your questions and your feedback. And again, as always, if you have topics that you want me to cover, leave them in the comments. Thanks again for joining me on this quest to raise a thriving future generation. I'll see you soon.